Hey everyone, this is a quick video on how I got into Hex, like my personal story, and why a Bitcoiner or any coin at all should listen to this. I kind of specifically mentioned Bitcoiners because I think in the BTC community, the FUD on Hex is mostly prevalent. I think in other coins that are more familiar with ERC20s, they mention like negative stuff, but I feel like it's mostly driven in the BTC side of things. So the point of this video is mostly to talk with, not kind of like persuade or anything, but talk with the Bitcoiners or any coiners like I mentioned that might have heard of Hex, but only like the negative stuff, right? Like they haven't actually looked into it, they haven't bothered to look into it. The people they hear it from haven't bothered to look into it. So I'm not saying look into it, like it would be awesome if you do, but at least the conversation could be uh, started in a way where I kind of talk about my personal side of things of how I got into Hex. Also, kind of firstly having a negative impression of it and how I went from that negative impression to looking into it and then now having a very good impression and very convinced on what the product itself is, right? And not exactly hearing from other people, but actually investigating and doing my research on the product itself. And now I can say I understand it in a very high manner, right? So this video is mostly for that audience, not exactly for Hex holders, but if you are a Hex holder and you want to listen to my story on how I get into Hex, awesome. Then this video is also for you. So here we go. Introduction. I got into Hex first quarter of last year. I guess that's pretty much the only relevant information for anyone out there. Been working for around 6, 7 years now after college, so you can kind of like guess the economic status. Never don't own a house, don't own a car, don't own anything. Just been renting and working from home. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit important to the story about the economic status to know like how easy for me it was or how much money I could put in or something like that in the terms of investing and holding and seeing that money invested grow, because someone who put in a ton of money, like a 2x, could mean already that they can buy a house, for example, and someone who put in not much money because they didn't have as much, a 2x is like, oh, you can afford a vacation, basically. So if you sell everything, right, if you just sell all your principal. So I guess it's a little bit important to put that into perspective. How I found out about Bitcoin in late 2017. So yeah, the bull market in December, like at the top of the bull market in December 2017, that's where a coworker mentioned to me about Bitcoin. I had heard about it, but it didn't like click to me anything. Like it was just like, oh, Bitcoin, and that's pretty much it. Um, but he told me about it in a more like, oh yeah, it's going up, it's going up, it's gonna keep going up, a little bit bullish from his end, while the top was basically in. So yeah, I kind of looked into it. It thankfully I took my time to research. So from the 20K top, it went down to 10K or like 13K. But when I ended up buying was on the 10K, kind of like in the middle, hoping that it had like a drop down and it was gonna keep going up, like after a little bit going down, go back up. But it kept going down afterwards. So that was by January 2018, I think. So yeah, that's basically how I got into it. Uh, so on the research part of it, like I mentioned, I got into Twitter, I guess. So between Twitter and YouTube, and I basically found out like the the hashtag for BTC and all this stuff to see opinions and like any influencers out there or important people per se, but important quote unquote, not exactly that they are important. um, so basically, yeah, I got into crypto Twitter a little bit, started following some accounts. Um, Someone that I found with awesome charts, like I don't know if they were right or not, but he kind of basically told me to follow a couple accounts. I did, and then in crypto Twitter, basically I found Richard Hart's Twitter. So that goes into the next slide, which is how I found Richard Hart, which was basically looking into into the hashtags of BTC, and Richard was like posting either bullish or bearish things. I don't remember exactly what he posted, but somehow it got me to follow him, based on what I was like hoping to see for BTC. Like I was a little bit of hopium at the time, so I wanted to follow people that um, were giving information that would make sure that Bitcoin was going up, right? Um, but I think at the same time, now that I think about it a little bit more, I think I was also looking for realistic approaches. So I think Richard was kind of bearish now that I think about it, and that made me follow him. I don't remember exactly, but that's basically how I found him, right, with Twitter. And so yeah, I was in BTC, right, and then I kind of like looked at the charts, and I noticed that, for example, Ethereum was outpacing Bitcoin in the gains. And I think Litecoin was as well. I don't remember very much, but I remember that there was like so much hype around Litecoin, like, oh, it's the quicker Bitcoin or something like that. Like Bitcoin is the past, Litecoin is the future. All those narratives, and I kind of fell for it. So I kind of followed Charlie Lee's account and everything and all that stuff with all that hopium going on, and I switched that BTC principle to Litecoin because I went like all in, right? I didn't diversify. I went like I want to put all my stack into something I believe in. So that's kind of how it went. But yeah, like I mentioned, I noticed that Ethereum was outpacing Bitcoin. I was like, how dare they, right? Because for me, I looked at Ethereum as a company, and I was like, what? That's not crypto. Like, it doesn't sound crypto-ish, Because I was a total noob, so I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't know exactly if Ethereum was like a network or a coin. I was really confused. So I saw that they were outpacing Bitcoin in the gains department, but since I didn't understand what it was, I didn't want to touch it. But obviously, I regret that very much. Now, Dogecoin, at the time, Dogecoin was already there, right? So, thanks to Dogecoin, I realized anyone can make meme coins and potential for scams. And I like to say the phrase a lot of people say about I was smart enough to be dumb, where that concept of, oh, an individual can make a coin, that means it's a scam or it's bad or it's, you know, not something you want to get into. That's a pretty bad way of thought, right? But going back to Dogecoin, like, it made me realize that, for example, I saw it was like a fork of, at the time I thought it was a fork of Bitcoin with just the logo change, but I think in reality it's a fork of Litecoin with the logo change. Um, so yeah, I was like, oh, okay, so someone, it doesn't have to be like Bitcoin, like the whole Satoshi deploying Bitcoin, or Ethereum being like a company, or like other companies that were launching their own coin. There's also like that part of the world that can someone, like an individual, launch a coin, and in reality, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the time, to me, it was like, oh, if it's not a big company or like a big famous celebrity or something like super genius backed, it's probably a scam, right? So yeah, so thanks to Dogecoin, I stayed with that concept of if it's in like something someone solely created, it's bad. But you'll later see that that's a bad thought. So I switched my investment back into Bitcoin and completely forgot about crypto for 3 years. So like I mentioned, right, I switched everything to Litecoin, and then I saw it was doing bad. Um, in a way that I was like looking at the charts, right? In a percentage, it was doing worse than Bitcoin. So I was like, wait, this Litecoin thing is not going well. So I was like, screw it. I'll switch everything to Bitcoin, which I thought, and could still be, I guess, but at the time I thought it more that it's gonna be like the golden standard for crypto in the future. Is the one that's gonna be the most rock solid. I knew that Ethereum was doing better graph, like price wise, like in percentages. But I was like, screw it, I'll just leave it all into Bitcoin, and in 10, 50 years or something like that, that point something Bitcoin, not even one, right? That point something Bitcoin is going to be worth so much. So yeah, that'll be my future. So yeah, I switched it to Bitcoin and completely forgot about crypto for 3 years. basically that's what what happened. Um, but before those 3 years, I think it was around a year and a half when I saw Richard Hart tweeting about Hex. That was 2019, I think. Pre 2009, like I saw the first tweets about him launching Hex, and then I noticed the tweets again when it launched because it didn't launch immediately after he announced it. Right, it took a while for Hex to launch. So yeah, I saw the tweets and I was like, just like I mentioned before, right, with the Dogecoin thing, if it's someone launching a coin and not a company or like someone super genius, which I respect Richard a lot, but at the time I didn't know. If it was something like a superstar, celebrity genius, or something like that, launching it, I thought it would be a scam because it's like, oh, so someone who knows about crypto is launching a coin knowing that people are gonna buy it and he can like rug pull or take profits or something like that. To me at the time, it was like that quick, immediate thought of, oh, I'm gonna stay away from it, right? So that's why it's pretty important to remind yourselves that if it's an individual launching a coin, don't jump into the thought of being like, oh yeah, I'm smart enough to know that this is a scam. It's like, yeah, you're smart enough to be dumb. So careful with that. But yeah, so at the time I saw the first tweets and I was like, yeah, this is not it. But at the same time, it's funny because I actually thought, oh, this guy seems like he knows a lot about crypto and marketing and all that stuff. So what if I put like $100 and then just see what happens, right? Like risk it, risk the $100. Um, but because I saw the potential 10,000x and all this stuff, like I was like, what if I risk $100 and if I lose them, it's fine, and if I don't, it's gonna be super awesome, right? But I was like, no, 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 no. This is so obvious. It's obviously a scam, so I'll stay away from it. So yeah. Um, so right, so that was 2019. 2020 now. I noticed a COVID dip and was like when COVID first hit, and I was considering buying more Bitcoin, but I was afraid the situation would require for me to use the money I had stored and would not be willing to risk it. So basically, the COVID happened and I wasn't fired or anything. Thankfully, like I was pretty blessed with that spot on my job. Um, but at the same time, I was like, what if eventually I get fired, or what if eventually something happens that I need that money that I could have invested in Bitcoin during the dip? So that kind of was my way back into crypto a little bit because I had completely forgotten about it. Like I mentioned, it was for 3 years almost, but in the middle of the 3 years, like I had that look to the charts or that little look into Bitcoin again. So yeah, I was considering on going in, but I was like, I'll stay away from it for now because the situation, global situation basically. And now 2020 ended, early 2021. I tried getting into like a trading Discord after noticing the whole AMC, GameStop, Dogecoin, like all that situation kind of happened at the same time in early 2021, I think, um, where Elon Musk was like pumping Dogecoin and all that stuff. So I was like, what if I and oh, and I actually downloaded the app Robinhood and all that stuff to be like, what if I get into trading, like buy something, let it go up, sell it, like try to go for the least profit possible, but some profit, right? Like my train of thought was, as soon as a stock gains 10%, sell it, and then jump to the next stock where I will believe it'll do like another 10%, and not go for like the 2x or like a 50% gain or anything greedy. But trading gets you wrecked. Don't trade unless I guess if you're an expert, but nobody's an expert in something that the whole world participates basically. So yeah, uh, that's when I thought trading was an option, but it obviously wasn't. I was taking some small profits, like the whole 10% thing kind of worked in a way. When I noticed a tweet of Richard Hart comparing crypto coins during a red week, and Hex was the only green one, the Florian lava, like the floor is lava. I mean, uh, that R is badly written. Floor is lava, and it caught my attention because I was like, oh, so while everything's going down, Hex is going up, even though it was like a daily chart or like a weekly chart, not sure, but it was a little bit, something that uh, there could be another week where someone in BTC could show BTC going green and Hex going red. So it's like something not very fair, I guess. But it took my attention again. So after years of not noticing Richard's tweets, I noticed that one, and I was like, interesting. So it caught my attention, right? Started looking at what Hex was or is, and the concept of rewarding for holding was basically everything I ever wanted, right? So I held BTC for 3 years, and the price did go up from January 2018 until April 2021, which was that top, which Richard Hart called it, by the way, on the day. I didn't notice the tweet at the day. I noticed it a little bit later. Anyways, so yeah, there was no rewards for me for holding, right? And that sounds like normal, I guess, because if everyone like the whole rewards thing in Hex, everyone gets it wrong because they think that the yield is like coming from like the question is from what's the yield coming like where's it coming from, right? What's producing that yield? And the answer is inflation, basically. So not to get too technical on Hex or anything, but at the time I didn't think much about it, and wrongfully, I didn't look enough into it. I just thought that the concept was awesome of rewarding for holding, right? Because I was like, hey, I held BTC for 3 years. The only thing I got from it is price appreciation, which is fine. That's enough. Shouldn't be going around with other narratives. But I was like, oh, if I had held something that rewarded me for holding, I would have more principle and not just the point something that I had of BTC. So it was pretty interesting to me. I started listening to Richard Hart streams and the highlight channels about Hex, like from different Hex channels and people that participate in the Hex ecosystem that talk about it and give game theory and you know charts and whatnot. So for me, it was pretty interesting listening to Richard, especially him debating other people or talking about things around Hex with Hex and all that stuff, especially the early streams from Hex because at the time it was like around first quarter 2021 and I was listening to his streams from 2020. So it wasn't the newest ones, but it was important for me to listen to the old ones as well to like kind of see how the if there was any narrative change or any contradictions on his statements between the past and the future or like the present. So it was pretty awesome to hear all his streams and kind of like all the thoughts and knowledge on crypto from his end. Like I'm not gonna say like exactly facts because they are, but if I don't want to get too biased, at least the scenarios he paints and all the situations that he tries to explain to people. So that was pretty insightful. Yep. So conclusions. Oh, so yeah, that's basically how I got in. I think there's other slides. No, there's no more slides. So, anyways, yeah. So just to end on before the conclusions. So yeah, basically, 2021 first quarter, I got into X after all those scenarios. Um, that's kind of basically my journey on how I got into it. And yeah, now the conclusions. Sorry, this is my first video. Conclusions: trading groups are not good. That's the first thing I want to highlight. Like that trading group I tried to get into, I'm so glad I got out because I found Hex. So I'm so glad I got out before making it a thing for me because it started a little bit good, but it obviously wasn't gonna end well. And that's why I kind of like got everything out with a little bit of profit and jumped into Hex. But I was already in the red numbers, right? So yeah, just basically it wasn't good and I got kind of saved. Coins aren't better because a big company launched them. It's better for a single person to launch a finished product and not a company launching a promising project. So, like I mentioned with the example and the story of Dogecoin, right? And how I looked at Ethereum and all that stuff. So, there's a lot, like, I know that right now there's a lot of hacks and rug pulls and companies going bankrupt and all that stuff. So, that's basically like a lesson learned for everyone that if something launches as a project, you have to really look at the roadmap and be willing to risk not of them not meeting the expectations. But if it's something that's a finished product, which in this case Hex is, then you don't have any expectations of the future. It's just that product itself, and you just want to make sure that it keeps running flawlessly for the end of time. And Hex has been running flawlessly for the time that it's been alive, right? So that speaks very highly of Hex, at least in that sense. Like if you want to call it any bad word in the world, you can't call it bad um, bad cryptocurrency because it's an actual cryptocurrency where the coin and the system, like the smart contract, it has been working flawlessly, trustlessly, no middleman. You mint your own rewards. Like it doesn't get any better. Like if you want to criticize anything else around it, like either Richard or like a possible rug pull or the OA or anything like around it, there's a lot of points to contradict those points, those attacks. But you can't deny that it's been working flawlessly for the like since the launch basically, and it all was some individual, hiring developers and whatnot, but it was the idea of one person launching it and putting it out there. It's not a project. It's not a company. Hex is not a company. It's just like you know a coin. So it doesn't get any better than that in my opinion. So yeah, and Hex is a better store of value than Bitcoin for long-term holders. So like I mentioned earlier, like the whole charts thing with Ethereum and Bitcoin, I knew that Ethereum was doing better than Bitcoin, so you can even call Ethereum a better store of value. But since Hex launched, it's been a much better store of value than Bitcoin. Like with the gains I have had from Hex, I can now actually complete a full Bitcoin, right? Not before I couldn't, and even though I held for a long time, that principle always stayed the same. The U.S. dollar value is the one that went up, but the amount of Bitcoin that I had stayed the same. And after switching to Hex, now I can actually buy a full Bitcoin. So I guess like a small example, but it really puts things into perspective of saying, oh, okay, so yeah, I want the technology and the future and the potential and all that stuff, but if you're exclusively in it for the gains, then it's kind of like a no-brainer of not having to choose Bitcoin over others. But to each their own. So yeah, that's pretty much a little bit of my story, how I got into Hex, how I was into crypto a little bit, and I guess the best thing I ever did was forget about it. I guess the lesson I learned from that is that I avoided all the influencers, scammers, trading groups, subscriptions, like all that stuff. I avoided because I bought Bitcoin, forgot about it, and held. So that's the ideal situation, right? Like that's the thing you want to do in crypto is you just want to buy and hold and survive through the markets. If you want to sell during a bull market or if you want to buy during a bear market, like those are the ideal situations. And especially with Bitcoin, I think that the best thing you can do is not listen to anyone um, in Bitcoin because what's the point, right? Uh, Nothing's gonna change from listening to them or not, unless you want to trade. But that's how you get wrecked and how they get rich. So be careful with that. At least in the Hex ecosystem, you do want to listen to Richard for news updates regarding like Pulsion. But for Hex, there's not much he can say that he hasn't said already. You can listen to him like debate other people or defend Hex uh, to the world. But yeah, like after Pulse chain launches and Pulse X with Pulse chain, like there's not much to expect from him. Like even now, right? But in the future, Richard can just live his life, go on, and occasionally check up on us or provide us with any like updates from economic world or anything like that. But we don't have to like subscribe to him in a like on a monthly payment thing or in a trading group or anything at all. Like he doesn't ask for donations, nothing like that. So I suggest that if you follow any Bitcoin influencers, you'd consider that as well of saying, okay, I'll try to listen to him and get tips, but I won't give him any of my money because at the end of the day, why should you give him any money, right? So yeah, thanks for listening and see you in the next one if there is a next one. Hopefully there is, but I'm not sure. Thank you. Goodbye.